What's going on, guys? Today we're going to go over how to replace the upholstery on the front seats of your Toyota Land Cruiser or LX470. This is going to apply to model years 1998 to 2007. I want this to be a pretty comprehensive guide, so we're just going to quickly go over how to take the seats out of the car. We're going to go over all the tools you need, all the parts that you need. We're going to go over how to disassemble the seats, remove the seat back, remove the bottom of the seat. We're going to go over how to reupholster everything, how to reassemble the seats. This is, I would say, a moderate to difficult type of job. I would say it's pretty tedious, but with just a little bit of time and patience, it's not too bad. So let's jump into it. Alright, so let's quickly go over the tools and the parts you're going to need for this job. So we have a 90-degree pick tool here, just a straight pick tool, some nice fabric scissors, a little bit of cutting we got to do, 12mm socket, a 14mm socket, our ratchet, Phillips head screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, some good side cutters. There's a lot of cutting that goes on with removing these old hog rings. You definitely want to get a good pair of side cutters. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Speaking of making your life easier, you definitely want to get a good pair of hog ring pliers. If you go on Amazon and you just buy the kits that are available that come with the pliers and the hog rings, this thing does not work well at all. I spent a few hours frustrated hours trying to use this guy and just had a hell of a time. So I definitely recommend picking up something a little bit nicer. I did some research online. This was recommended to me. It's the S. Osborne & Co. hog ring pliers. Now these are pricey. I think they were about $35 just for the tool, but let me tell you, these are definitely worth it. I would highly recommend getting these. The angle of the tool, just the amount of force you can get on the actual hog rings, the teeth of the tool, they also hold the hog rings really nicely in there, so you can kind of put the hog ring in there, get into the spot you need to get to, and then clamp it down without any issues. Highly recommend these guys. A couple optional tools here, just a plastic pry tool, some pliers, and just a little magnet. These tools are kind of helpful when you're trying to get the old hog rings out. You can kind of use the magnet or the pliers to pull those out. So as far as the materials go, you're going to need some hog rings. So these are just 3/8 inch hog rings that I got off of Amazon. I'll have a link for that in the description as well as for everything else. You're going to need some good glue. So I have these two glues here that I ended up using on this project because I had these laying around, but I think the best glue for this job is going to be the 3M Super 54, which is specifically designed for foam and fabrics. So I'll have a link for that below. Then obviously you're going to need your new leather. So we have our leather here from LSeat. So for these trucks, you'll probably see they're going to be either a tan or a gray interior. Now LSeat has a lot of different color options. This is the dim gray for the gray. This is what matches the stock interior the closest that I found. And as far as the tan interior, if you have a tan interior, you're going to want to go with a Bisque tan. Doing some research online, that seems like the best option to match the tan interiors. You're going to get everything in this kit. So you're going to get seat bottom, seat back, armrest. You're going to get headrest. You're also going to get the center console piece. So it's going to be everything to redo all the leather. And then you're also going to need some foam. This is some 1/2 inch foam. It was a little thick. I think I would, if I did it again, I would go with a 1/4 inch foam. So I'll have a link for the 1/4 inch foam in the description. So the first step here is going to be coming into the vehicle and removing the seat. So there's going to be 4 of these 14mm bolts, one on each corner of the seat. There's going to be a little plastic piece that covers this. Just use a plastic trim removal tool like this to pop it off, and then just use your ratchet to loosen up these 4 14mm bolts. Once you have those removed, the seat's going to be loose, and then underneath the seat there's a couple wires that will be holding the seat in still. There's going to be these clips like this guy. Just push down on the back, and then this will slide out, and then you'll be free to remove the seat. Alright, the first thing we're going to remove here on the seat is the armrest. So there's basically just one bolt holding this into the side of the chair. Just got to remove this plastic trim piece first, so we just have this trim removal tool here. Just put it in there and carefully pry this out. It's just kind of held in by some tension there. Now in here there is a 14mm bolt, so we're going to go ahead and remove that now. Just in there pretty tight. And there we go, there's this other little plastic piece that sits up in here, so just keep track of that. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is remove the headrest. So all we have to do for that is press this clip down and pull up on the headrest. And there we go. Alright, so the next step here is to remove this back panel off the back of the seat. It's going to be a bit tricky. There's these two clips basically that hold the seat cover at the top, and those are really hard to get off, but I just found a good trick to do that. And basically you're just going to use like a pick tool like this. Alright, so you can see this clip here. Basically this clip just slides in and out from the inside. You can see that. So initially I was trying to push this off because there's a metal rod basically that sits inside of here. That's what holds the seat back on. I was trying to push this down, you know, when this is all tight up in here. I was trying to push that down to release this. But that was really tricky, and I was afraid I was going to break this clip. I found that the best way is basically come in from the side with this pick tool and just push this out like that, and then that's going to allow you to completely release this, and then you can just repeat that on the other side. Alright, once you get those two clips out at the top, this whole piece basically just sits in here like this. You can just pull up, and you can see here there's these two kind of clips that just sit on the back of the seat here. Alright, so as you can see with the seat back, basically the elastic's just real loose. This thing kind of wobbles around and whatnot. So what we're going to do is go ahead and fix that, and how we will do that is back here you can see basically this elastic just gets old over time and gets stretched out. So what you can do is basically just kind of tighten this up, and then I'll show you how to reconnect that here in a second. When we tighten this up here, it'll kind of hold this front side tight, but you'll still have that elasticity, you know, to put whatever you need to in the back. Alright, so to tighten this up, this elastic, you can see there's these two little metal rods here that kind of hold this elastic in place, and there's these two hog rings here. So in order to tighten this up, I'm basically just going to roll this over on itself a couple of times. Kind of hold it in place, and then check to see, you know, is it in a place where it's, you know, tight but not too tight where you can't open it. And then once that's in place, you'll just take your hog rings and your hog ring pliers, and then just kind of wrap this into place. Alright, so I got my hog rings on there. See, I just kind of rolled it up a little bit, and then put these hog rings around the metal rods in there to keep it in place. And now you can see from the front side, I haven't put these bottom pieces in yet, but you can see from the front side, you know, nice and tight, returns back to place, but not too tight where I can't open it. Alright, the next step here is going to be to remove these plastic trim pieces that wrap around the bottom of the seat. So we're going to start with the left hand side here. I'm just going to need a Phillips screwdriver. So we'll go ahead and remove this back one here first. And the next one for this side is going to be around, let's see, here in the middle. Now you have to excuse the disgustingness of this seat. I bought it in quite disrepair, and we're kind of working our way through this project. So taking this all apart gives me a good opportunity to clean all this stuff as well. One more here at the front of the seat. As you can hear, there's some clips that kind of hold this guy in place as well. It's just not just the screws, but once you get those 3 screws out, then you kind of have to just work your way around and pull out the remainder of those clips. Last clip is a bit of a doozy. It's this one at the top here. You can see it kind of goes in there, and it's kind of this long piece like that. Just had to pry on it a little hard. I pried on it here. At the same time, I kind of took my plastic trim piece and put it in here, and that kind of helped me. Between that prying on this back here and pulling from the top, that helped me release that last clip. All right, by now you will have noticed that this plastic piece still cannot come off because the seat belt goes through it. And there's basically a 14mm bolt here that we need to remove. And then you can see there's a wire that comes through here and leads underneath the seat. And then we'll need to remove that as well, this clip. If you can't get to it with your hand, you can use something like a pick tool to just push down on this little clip and then just pull the wire back. When you take this bolt out, just take note that there's this little metal retainer that goes between the bolt and the bracket. We'll want to make sure we reinstall that in this same order when we put it back together. The wire for this is held in a couple spots with these little clips. You can just pinch it on either side of the clip with some pliers or a pick tool, and this will just slide out. On the other side of the seat, similar situation, there's basically going to be two screws, one here in the back, and then one underneath up here. And once we remove those, we'll have similar clips to the other side that we'll need to pop open, keeping in mind that tricky one here that's at the top up here. And I just noticed there's actually two more bolts. We got one right here and one down here. Right here. So when we're working on this side with the control module, we undid those 3 screws or 4 screws, and then we got the clips out. Just be careful when you are pulling it to get the clips out, because you don't want to yank on it too hard, because there's this plug that's plugged in here. You don't want to damage the wires or the module. Now you just need to remove this plug. You want to push down until you hear a click, and then you should be able to wiggle it out. There we go. So just a general overview of how the seat's kind of put together. You can see here there's basically a metal frame that houses all the mechanical components that move the seat around, and then within that frame are the bottom cushion and the back cushion. And then basically what we need to do is remove the back and the bottom cushion in order to do the reupholstering, and we need to remove that from this frame. So we'll start with the back piece. The back piece is pretty straightforward. There's a few things we need to keep in mind. Basically, there's these 2 bolts, 14mm bolts on this side, and there's the same mirrored on the other side. And then there's also, you can see here, this back kind of fabric piece. This is attached to the front upholstery, and it kind of wraps all the way around onto the back. And this actually goes around this metal rod that runs across the back here. It goes around it so that you can't see the metal rod otherwise. So this is something to keep in mind when we're reupholstering, and for removing this, we need to make sure we pop this off first. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. Basically just pull it up. It just kind of holds onto there like that. Now you can see under here below this little piece of foam, you can see that metal rod there. So yeah, we have those pieces, and then lastly, all these cars do have heated seats, so there is a wire that runs from each individual cushion underneath the seat. So when we're removing that, I'll kind of show you how we can undo that wire. All right, so I got those 4 bolts out, 2 on either side, and you can see the back is loose, but it's still kind of being held in place. These 2 little fabric pieces also loop around, and they're held on by these hog rings. So we can just take our pliers here, cutters, and cut those hog rings off. One on either side here. Now, note when we were cutting these hog rings off, this is kind of the first of many, many hog rings we're going to be cutting. Try not to drop these on the ground. They're really, really sharp after you cut them. You don't want these laying in your garage or, popping a tire or something like that, or stepping on them. So just as you go along, kind of keep track of where they're landing and pick them up every time you cut one off. Alright, so you can see the back is completely loose now, but we still have this wire that's, like I said, running back from the heated seat on the back portion here underneath the seat. So let's go underneath the seat and figure out where that needs to be disconnected. Before we go underneath the seat to disconnect the wire, there's one last screw here that'll give us some leeway to run this wire through. Just this one screw here that holds this plastic trim piece on. You just leave the trim piece on there. Just want to make it loose so it's a little bit easier to get that wire through. Let's flip over the seat. Just be careful because you're hanging by that wire a little bit, so don't let that back pad slip off. Now you can see, now that we're under the seat, where that plug plugs into. It's just this little white plug right here. Pinch down on there and pull it out. And now we just want to run this through back out so we can get the seat out. You can see up here, basically just running this wire out from under the seat, out and around the controls here, back behind our plastic trim piece, and then that'll just pull right out the backside here with our cushion. All right, success. We've removed the back portion of the seat completely from the car. See, we've got our wire here for the heated seat. Yeah, we'll set that to the side now and remove the bottom portion of the seat. Alright, so for the bottom portion here, we have 4 12mm bolts. There's going to be one on either side here, and then there's going to be 2 more under here, just at the very front of the seat. You can see there's one there and one over here. So just remove those. And then lastly, we're going to have another heated seat plug to contend with. So that's going to be, if we look at the top of the seat here, you can see it comes around and then it's plugged in right here. Just another one of those clips. Go ahead and unclip that, and then we should be good to go. To get those 4 bolts out, you'll notice that while the seat is mostly loose, a lot of these wires are kind of zip tied and connected to the bottom of the cushion. So we kind of have to go around, work our way around and just remove all of those. There's a lot of these little guys, like these little clamshell type of clips that are kind of click in. If you just kind of pull up on both of these tabs, it'll release the jaws, and then you'll be able to open those up. So just slowly work your way around, remove the clips that you need to, and then wiggle the seat, see if you're free until you've gotten all of them. Just want to show you guys a couple of the trickier clips that are under here. There's this one that you'll probably run into that's kind of attached to like the fabric over here on the left hand side. The best way I found for this one was to just take kind of a flathead screwdriver, put it in there to open up those jaws. Once those jaws are opened up, then it slides off much easier. These are a bit tricky as well. You can see how they're designed to kind of go through, and then these jaws kind of hold on. So what I did was, when these were in place, like up here, on the back side, I basically took my 90-degree pick tool and kind of just pushed on one of these clips, pushed on that while I pulled out. And once I got one of these jaws free and pulled through, I was able to just basically pull it all the way through. So we got the metal frame separated from the bottom cushion, so we can now go ahead and set this metal frame aside. It's also a great time to clean the metal frame if you want to. Just use a little bit of soap and water. Just be gentle, being mindful of all the electronics that are down here, the motors and wires, etc. I'll probably brush mine off a little bit, but honestly, everything's working fine, so probably don't need to do too deep of a cleaning. Alright, we're going to start with working on the backside cushion. You can see the way that the leather is kind of wrapped around here. Basically, there's these hog rings here that are basically wrapping the entire piece of leather around the metal frame here. So what we need to do now is just take our pliers here, our cutters, and just go around and remove all of these old hog rings. Again, keep in mind when you cut these, try not to drop them into the seat if you can help it. You just don't want to lose any of these. If they end up on the floor, you step on them, you drive on them. If you get stuck in the cushion as we're removing them, you might feel them in the seat after you install the new cushion. So just be mindful when you go one by one. Just keep track of the pieces, put them in a box or in the trash can right away. A quick good tip, when you're cutting those hog rings off and they kind of might fall into places, use a little magnet like this, a little extendable magnet to pick up the pieces. Makes it a little easier when they're in spots that are hard to reach. Right, now that we got those first hog rings out on the back, the next section here is basically going to be removing the hog rings that are holding the front piece of the leather to the frame. So how you're going to do this is basically just start peeling up from the front, or I guess the bottom of the seat here, and then you're going to look inside here. You can see there's a hog ring there. There's going to be one on the other side as well, and you're just going to one by one cut those hog rings off, and as you cut those hog rings off, you'll be able to slowly peel back this piece of leather. Basically, wherever there's a kind of crease in the leather here is basically there's going to be a metal rod that is hog ringed to the back of the frame. Okay, so the last piece to remove the leather from the seat is the holes where the headrest goes into. So essentially there's kind of some paws that hold that into place, as you can see here. On either side, there's those little things that are poking out. So you just gotta push those in, and then you can slide it up and out. So you can see we have our new leather here on the left and our old leather that we just took off. If you ordered from LSeat, I'm not sure if other manufacturers do this, but basically you don't get the metal rods in here. So we have to repurpose those from the old leather. So, just go one by one, take the rod out, and then you can just kind of, have these next to each other. And then you can kind of just put that old rod into the new seat cover. Good to go. Just make sure you get all the different rods. There's quite a few of them in the sides, in the middle, and the top. There's these really long ones that go kind of all the way around. One thing I did notice is in some spots, like here, you can see where it goes all the way around here. On the old seat, there's two, or I guess in this case, three rods, one on either side, and then one on the top. And there's a break in the middle here, where basically the little hook comes around and holds on to the piece that it's in. Now you don't have that on this new piece, so what you can do is just go ahead and cut at the spot where you need it to be. Cut one on either side. When you put that rod in, it'll be able to stay in place inside of there. And there's a couple spots where you might come across that issue. Just cut this so it fits the rod. The last thing we want to retain from the old piece of leather is obviously the heated seat portion. So that's basically just kind of glued on, so we can just peel it off. There are these little, ties, I don't know what you call these, but little plastic pieces that are kind of holding these flaps down in certain places. So we just have to remove those, and then this whole thing will just basically peel off, and then we'll glue that onto the new piece of leather. So we have our heated mat here now completely removed from the old leather, and we're laying it out on the new leather. Just want to kind of line it up how you want to install it. Should be pretty much exactly how it was on the old leather. Now, one thing I noticed here is that you want these rods to be above this intersection, because when we attach this leather to the seat, this is going to get pulled down really tight, and we don't want to be pulling up against the mat here because it could separate from the backing. So another thing, because this is going to be pulling up, and because there's some excess of this sleeve here, we might want to cut just a small relief in this so that it's not pulling up against the heated mat. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get this glued down now. Make sure to read the instructions on your glue. All the glues are a little bit different. I'm using this Performance High Temp glue. I didn't realize there's also a 3M product that's good for foam and vinyl and things like that. It's called Super 74. I'll have a link down in the description for that, but we're using this guy here. So gonna shake it up, and then you want to apply it to not only where you're gluing, but also this piece. And for this glue in particular, it says to wait for about 2 minutes till the glue gets tacky, and then we'll go ahead and glue that down. Now for this top section. Go ahead and press it down now, making sure our bars are out of there. If you go around and you notice that there's some edges maybe that are missing a little bit of glue, and you can kind of peel that up and add some glue in there. It's important that this is really glued down because, as the seat moves around over the rest of the life of the car, you don't want these pieces kind of peeling up and building up, and then next thing you know, you got to take the whole seat cover off to fix it. So definitely want to make sure those edges are glued down well. All right, next up on this back piece is going to be to go ahead and remove this old foam off of here. You just kind of go slow, peel it up, it should all come off. One thing to keep in mind when taking these off, if we can get them off in one piece, we can actually use them as a template when we go to make our new foam. So do your best just to kind of peel them off in one piece. It'll make our life a little bit easier. Alright, so we're on to the bottom cushion now. Very similar to the back cushion, you're going to have a couple rods here with these hog rings that we need to cut. Couple differences though, there's this piece kind of folded down here that's pretty difficult to get off, so we'll do this last. And there's these tabs that are kind of holding the front side in place. So for those tabs, you can just use like a flathead screwdriver and kind of peel those back, and that'll allow you to loosen that up. So I'm going to start with the tabs, start in the hog rings. There's also a little area over here that's kind of like folded up inside of a little metal piece. So I'm going to start with the easy things, and then that should make these harder pieces a little bit easier to remove. Alright, now that we got the cushion and the leather separated from the metal frame, you probably saw that I was struggling a little bit with this big piece of plastic that holds on the side that I was talking about previously. The best way I found to get that out is just to use a pick tool to kind of get started on the edge, to kind of just stick it in there and pull it out of the metal frame. And then from there, once you get it loose a little bit, you can get a bigger screwdriver in there and kind of pry it out. And then once that comes out and you got all the hog rings off, then you kind of just push the foam and the leather back, and then that bottom big plastic piece kind of just falls right out. So from here, the next thing we need to do is obviously remove the leather from the foam. The bottom piece is a little bit different than the back piece, where the side bolstering actually has additional heating strips on it. So we'll cover that more in a second, but first of all, there's more of those little pink plastic pieces that are holding the leather kind of to the heating element down here. So what we need to do is just go and cut those two, and then from there we should be able to do the same thing that we did on the back, where we basically just need to go inside of here, cut all the hog rings out that are in there, and then just peel this leather off the foam. So one thing you're going to notice different as well on this bottom cushion is that instead of gluing the heating element to the leather, they've glued the heating element to the foam itself. So that just makes it a little bit different when we're taking this off. You'll need to take this metal rod out before you can remove the leather, because it runs underneath the heating element here. Now that we have the old leather off of the foam completely, we want to go ahead and transfer over all those old rods again to the new leather. Again, you'll have to probably cut some holes where these rods need to stick out, since some of this material doesn't have holes already. It's going to be very similar to the back piece. So a quick note again, when installing these rods, any place that you see that there's extra material, so when you put this rod in, you hook it around the ends of this material, if it looks like it's pulling the material inwards, we want to cut off that extra material, because when we go to install this back into the foam, if it's pulling it in a way that's not the same as the original, it's going to put weird creases in our leather for our final product, so we don't want to have that. I noticed that for this middle piece here, there's about 3/4 of an inch on either side that needs to be cut to fit this rod more precisely. And I noticed that as well up here at the top, where there's like probably a good 3 inches extra on either end up here. So just cut a little hole with some nice scissors and put those rods in there. Just the exact same length as the rods, that way it can hook around and it's not pulling from the sides. There's a few options with how to proceed now. It kind of depends on what you're looking for in the current condition of your foam. Basically, I've bought new foam to put in here to replace this old foam, because you'll probably notice on yours that this black foam that's on top is now very compressed. There's not much life left to it. I've heard of some people going and steaming this foam to bring it back to life, but foam's really cheap, so I figured I would just remove this old foam, replace it with some new foam, glue this back down, and move on with putting the leather on. Now, the question mark here is the side bolstering. On the driver's side seat, you'll probably notice that the side foam is really worn out from getting in and out of the vehicle so many times. So this is actually the passenger side. I've done the driver's side already. So on the driver's side, what I did is I basically cut out these heating elements here because they're kind of taped down. And then I put new foam on the side bolsters, and then I put the heating element back on top of that. So, if your foam looks okay, you can just leave this as is, peel back this portion, replace this foam, and then glue this back down, put the leather back on top. I think what I'm going to do regardless is cut this out, put new foam on the side bolsters here as well. It kind of gives you a little bit more of a sporty fit in the seat, kind of holds you more with some bigger bolsters. So that's how I'm going to proceed. I think also I'm going to actually glue the heating element. Since I'm cutting this out anyway, I'm going to glue the heating element to the leather like we did on the back piece, rather than glue it to the foam. I think it's going to have a better hold over time, just because the foam feels like it's going to move around more. It's going to loosen the glue, whereas the leather is kind of more stiff, I guess you could say, where it's not going to move around as much, and I think it will get a better hold. One other thing I want to mention is, if you do have a lot of worn out foam on the sides, and you decide not to put new foam and you just wrap the new leather around, this new leather is designed, from what I can tell, to fit basically a brand new seat. So if you go ahead and you put this leather on and maybe your foam is worn down, maybe you don't replace this foam, or the side bolster foam is worn down, you're going to have kind of a loose fit on the leather. So definitely recommend replacing the foam in the middle section here, and kind of up to you whether you want to do the side bolsters, whether or not it's worn out. I think in this case you'd be fine either way, just because this is the passenger seat and it's not very worn, but chances are on the driver's seat you'll definitely want to put some new foam here on the sides. Alright, so next up here on the bottom cushion is going to be to remove this old foam. You can just kind of slowly peel it up. It should come up not too bad. And then I'm also going to go ahead and cut out these old strips. Just be careful on the passenger side seat. It looks like there's an occupancy sensor here, so just be mindful of that when you're peeling up this foam. When you're removing these heating pads on the side, it has this really sticky tape that kind of holds the pad in place. So at first I thought maybe I would just cut this out, but it might be nice to have this extra material to help glue it down when I decide to glue it to the leather side. So what you can do is just kind of start at the corner and kind of peel it up slowly. The glue is going to try to take the foam with it, and sometimes, so you just kind of want to go slow and kind of roll your finger along the tape a little bit to try to, kind of help keep the foam down while the tape comes up. You'll notice that some areas are a little bit stickier than others. It'll try to pull the foam more, but just kind of go slow and just work your way across. You can see here, I got a little foam on there, but for the most part, it's okay. We're going to put new foam all through here anyway, so it'll cover up any small indentations that we might make during this process. Alright, we'll say this is not going as well as the other side. I'm getting a little bit more foam than I'd like. You can see over on this side, it's not too bad, only got a little bit of foam. And try to resurrect it over here. Alright, not too bad. We're going to put new foam over that anyway, so it should be alright. I can see on this other side, fared a little bit better. Didn't get too much foam out of here, a little bit out of the front, but again, we'll put new foam over that, so you won't even notice. Okay, so we got everything stripped down now. All the old leather's off, we removed all the foam, so it's time to go ahead and install new foam. So we're quickly going to go over where we want to install new foam on the seat bottom and the seat back. So first of all, we obviously want to go in all the original locations. So we'll use these 3 pieces as templates to cut out foam for those spots. And then we also want to do new foam on these side bolsters and all the way around. So you can cut one big piece of foam that's going to go here and wrap around the side. And then you also want to wrap around this front area too. This is going to make it so that when you put the leather on, it's going to look really nice and filled out. If you don't put foam in all these places, you might end up with some loose leather on the outside. It just gives a better look if we fill that out with some new foam. So this is the bottom piece. We want to do something similar on the back piece as well. So we're going to have our 3 pieces here that we'll use as templates, and then we can also put some new foam up here. That'll just help fill out the leather a little bit at the top. And then again, we'll also do these side bolsters, and we'll come all the way around with it. That way it gives us a nice even look. Otherwise, if we only put foam here, we don't put foam on the sides, it might leave kind of an awkward crease in the side of the leather when we put the leather back on. So it's just easiest if we come all the way around with that new foam. So we'll go there, both sides, the top. And then another place I want to mention is just here at the top of the seat where the headrest goes in. What I did on the driver's side was I put a piece of foam at the top here as well. I noticed that the leather was really loose up top, so just to help fill that out a little bit, I also put some foam up here as well. Another quick note before you cut your foam: you want your foam to come all the way, just up to the edge where this crack is. If you cut your foam and you're, a little bit farther down like this, you're gonna be able to feel kind of a notch here when you put the leather back on. So we just want to make sure we're all the way up to where that crack is, and then the leather's going to come over the top. There's going to be that bar in here that we're going to hog ring down, and it's going to kind of pull this down in a little bit and give you a nice uniform look and feel from the top. For this top piece, I'm actually going to cut a piece that goes here, and it's just one piece that comes down here and around here. That way I avoid any extra gap here at the top. Alright, we got this bottom piece completely foamed up. You can see I made this piece that kind of comes around on the bolsters. Then we have our 3 pieces down the middle that we outlined. We've got everything all glued up now. Alright, so we got our back piece all foamed up. We got our leather here, we got all the rods in place, we got our heating element in place. A couple things you want to check before we start wrapping the back piece here with the leather. First of all, you're obviously going to need some holes here for your headrest, so go ahead and preemptively cut some holes in the foam. And then once we get the leather on, we can cut the holes in that afterwards. Then also on the side here, this is where the armrest connects, so just make sure that there's an opening here. We'll do the same thing. We'll cut a hole in the leather once we put that back on. And then lastly, before we get going, just make sure there's nothing in the seat foam. Make sure there's no hog rings left in here. Last thing you want is to wrap this thing up and there's a hog ring stuck in here. You feel that when you're sitting in the seat. So just kind of shake that out a little bit. Shake out the leather as well. Make sure there's nothing in there. And then we're ready to start wrapping this thing. Alright, so as far as strategy getting this leather piece on there, we'll just start with this top piece here. Work your foam and seat frame into there. It's going to be a little loose, but you're just going to kind of get it in there, get it started. In general, just kind of make sure everything's kind of aligned and centered as you go along. I'll flip this over. Now essentially we're just going to kind of start working our way. We'll start, peel this back a little bit, and then we'll start with the topmost metal rods up here. It's 2 small rods at the very, very top. And then basically, you're just going to take your hog ring pliers and your hog rings. And then as an example, we'll look at this rod right here. Basically what you're going to be doing, it's going to be hard to show on camera because it's going to be way up in there, but basically what we're going to be doing is going to each of those rods, taking one of these hog rings, wrapping it around the rod like so, and then pushing down the seat leather into the crack where the rod is in the seat frame, and then trying to align that, close up the hog ring onto that rod down into the seat, and that's going to give us a nice secure connection. You want to make sure you get all the hog rings that were basically in there originally. You want to kind of recreate where those were. So it's going to be something like 2 up here, 3 across each of these rods. Each section up here, I believe, has 2 as well. So you're going to start your way up from the top inside of here. Just kind of work your way back, kind of pulling the leather and making sure everything is centered as you go along. Alright, so we're working on the backrest portion of the seat. You can see so far I've got this rod hog ringed in, and this rod, and this rod. Now I'm working on this rod underneath, so if we look in here, you can see we got the rod there in the middle of the screen, and then we're going to just go ahead and hog ring that down into the foam down here. And you can see, as you're going where the hog ring should really be, because there's kind of a clearing in the foam. So you can see here there's 3 spots where those needs to be hog ringed down. So, you're going to push that down, take your hog ring pliers, put the hog ring in there, wrap it around this, push it down, clamp it down onto the rod in the seat, and then just keep on working down the seat. Alright, so we got all the bars on the front side of the seat hog ring down. Now we're on the back side. So last thing we need to do here is pretty much just hog ring these pieces over. You kind of stretch this around. There's going to be these holes here. We're going to put those hog rings on the side. This top part gets hog ringed to these 2 pieces. And then lastly is this piece at the bottom. Now remember, this piece has to go around that bar in the chassis of the seat. So we'll do that once we reinstall this, bolt this back into the seat. Basically just need to wrap this around, and then we can hog ring these 2 last little pieces over here, and then we'll be good to go. So before we reinstall the leather onto the foam, there's one thing we want to change on the way that this fabric is, where these rods go through. Because this heating element, when we glue it down to the foam, we don't want this rod to be over the top and then being pulled down by the rod. We want the rod to pass underneath this when it's glued down to the foam. So in order to give way for that to go through, you can kind of see here, we need to cut this fabric where the rod goes through to allow for these felt pieces to kind of pass through. So you just lay it down in here, mark where you need to cut it, take the rod out if the rod is in there, and then just cut these pieces. And then this will make a little bit more sense once we're putting the leather back on top of this. Alright, so working on the bottom piece now. First step is really just going to be to put this giant plastic piece on first. It's pretty tricky to get on there if we hog ring everything down and we're trying to get it on there after the fact. So now that we have a little bit of slack, you want to put your seat bottom in there into the new leather and kind of get everything centered up a little bit, and then fold that plastic piece over and get it clipped into the metal frame here. And we just want to do this part. We don't want to get this part secured yet because we might need to move the leather around still a little bit before we hog ring things down. But just get this started up here, clip this down into place, and then you can also fold back these little tabs. That'll kind of keep everything centered while we're doing the rest of the work on the bottom cushion. As you're putting the upholstery on here and you're putting your hog rings in one row at a time, I found that it's helpful to, after you do each hog ring, kind of hold on to the frame of the seat and then grab the leather, kind of just pull on each side as you go to make sure that leather's being stretched over the top. If you come all the way to the end, you never stretched it, you're not going to be able to get that looseness out at the end. So just kind of as you go, keep pulling it along, make sure you have everything nice and tight. Alright, so we're onto the bottom cushion here, and we're to the section where we're going to have that half moon shaped rod, and the rod needs to go through this piece that holds the rod and then go underneath these kind of felt pieces. Otherwise it's going to push down on this and it's going to pull your heated mat kind of around where you don't want it. So we're just going to go ahead and feed this through. And then as we go, we're going to go underneath the white there, back into the holder, and underneath the white again. And back into the holder. And now when we hog ring this down into the seat, it's not going to pull on these two tabs and dislocate our heating mat. Alright, so we just finished wrapping the bottom part of the cushion here. We got all the bars on the top side. Now we're just wrapping up the bottom, so we should already have all of our little tabs on and this big plastic piece on. And then on the sides here, we have a couple things. We have this little plastic piece that's going to come over the edge and go into the slot. Then we're down here, we have this plastic piece that needs to go onto these two little bumps, so we can just put some hog rings around there. And then on this side, we have the nice big bar that we just need to go ahead and hog ring onto these little bumps again. I ran into a bit of an issue on mine where basically the fabric here is kind of tearing where the bar is, so I'm gonna get some thread and I'll just kind of sew this up a little bit so it kind of stops it from tearing anymore. And then lastly, down here we have the bottom plastic piece that goes towards the back of the seat. You're probably going to find that this part is pretty tricky to wrap over, especially if you added some extra foam to your seat. The best way that I found was basically, pull the leather back as much as you can and then pull it over the top, and then just really use as much power as you can to get it started. I used kind of like a screwdriver and I put it into the side here and I kind of pushed it down to get that little lip over the metal down here. Basically, if you look under here, you can see that I got either side clipped onto the metal, but here in the middle, you can see that it hasn't quite gone around the metal yet. So once I had this started, to get that last little middle piece on, pretty much just kind of grabbed the leather like this, pulled it over as much as I could, and then pushed it down over here. And that was able to clip everything in place. Alright, we got all the leather on now. Everything's hog ringed down. Everything's ready to go. Last thing here is just putting a few holes in the leather because we need to have access for some of the mounting holes. So there's on the bottom piece here, there's going to be a bolt on either side, kind of right here. And if you go underneath, just right about where this bar is here, you'll see, if you look into the sides, you'll see where the bolt goes through. You can feel around on the side of the leather to find the hole, and then just poke some holes in there in the leather for those bolts. So I'll have those two bolts. These two bolts are unstructured, so those are ready to go. And then on the back seat here, the back part of the seat, there's a few places that will need holes as well, starting with the headrests. So we already put those holes in the foam, so we should have a pretty easy job finding those holes. We'll put some holes there. And then lastly, for the armrest, on this is the passenger seat, would be on the left hand side. You can kind of feel around where that armrest needs to go. So we need to put a hole there, then we can mount the armrest up, and then we'll be pretty much ready to go and put this thing back into the seat bracket. A little trick here for getting the cutout for the armrest. I cut out the old leather. It has a little template here. I'm just going to kind of hold that up, trace it out, cut a rough shape to that, and then mount up the armrest. Quick tip when you're installing the bottom cushion back into the seat assembly, start with the side bolts. The front bolts can be a little weird with the way that it moves the seat around and where the brackets sit. So if you put these side bolts in first, it's going to be easier to align those front two bolts. Alright, so the bottom cushion is completely in now. We're putting the back cushion on. A couple things to remember. First of all, this wire needs to come down through the plastic trim piece here around. There's a little bit of a track there that it runs in. Then it'll go underneath the seat. You can see it goes up into here as well. Boop. And then before we bolt this on, we also need to keep in mind there's a little screw that holds this plastic trim piece on. And lastly here, this leather piece is going to wrap around the bottom and back onto the back of the seat, and we'll do that once we bolt everything in on the sides here. Alright, now that we got those side bolts in on either side, all 4 of them, we can go ahead and finish up the back piece here. This leather piece is going to come all the way up to here, sit there, and then these 2 little flaps are going to get hog ringed, one to here and one up to here. Alright, another quick tip for getting this plastic piece around. I was having a heck of a time. If you just undo this tube a little bit, just kind of, make it less tight of a spiral, makes it a lot easier to just kind of pull right over the top, and you can just kind of close it up a bit. If you have any issues getting this back piece on, just make sure it's pushed all the way down, otherwise those top 2 clips won't line up. And once you're sure it's pushed all the way down, you can kind of hold the front of the seat and give it a good shove on either side here where those clips are, and it should just clip into place. Alright, the last couple pieces we need to worry about here are the headrest and the armrest. These are pretty straightforward. You basically just need to rip off the old leather and put on new leather. There's not much else to it. You can add a little bit of foam to the top of the armrest, so that way you have a little bit more of a cushion on your arm when you got that installed in the car. So I might do that. But just basically kind of look at the new pieces to give you an idea of what the old pieces are going to be like as far as removing them. Basically there's like these clips where the plastic kind of pushes in to this other piece of plastic, and that's what holds it in place. And the OEM setup has a very similar action to it. You can kind of just pry it apart, if you use a flathead screwdriver or something like that. This little plastic piece will usually kind of come right out. There we go. Now that that's removed, it's kind of just a game of peeling this off like a banana. The headrest has a similar situation where there's basically this long black plastic piece and this other piece, and they kind of fold into one another to clip in. This is pretty tricky to get out, so just take your time with it. But again, you can take like a flathead screwdriver or a pick tool, kind of work at it in here until this seam kind of opens up, and then from there you can kind of peel it off just like the armrest. Alright, I found that if you can get your flathead worked into here, kind of pull up on it, basically let it go. See, this kind of separate these 2 pieces, but they're just folded in a way it's kind of tricky. But once you can get it started, you can kind of work your screwdriver down in here and just pry it out. There we go. Alright, then as far as reinstallation of the new leather, just make sure you have it oriented correctly with how the headrest is. It looks like this bigger plastic piece goes in the front. But as far as installing it, just take your time. If you're too aggressive, you might end up ripping the new leather, so just be careful with that. And also, as far as the foam goes, if you kind of squeeze the foam a little bit as you're pushing it in, kind of helps you get the leather around there. Alright, for the armrest here, similar strategy as the headrest. We're just going to wrap this around and pull it on tight. If you'd like to, you can put another little piece of foam, cut a piece of foam that'll fit right here if you want a little more cushion for your arm. A trick that I used on the driver's side that I think I'm going to try again here is to basically put the armrest in like a plastic bag basically before putting it into the leather. If you try to do that without the plastic bag, the materials here are not very slippery. It's very, very hard to get this all the way pushed up at the front just because it's such a narrow piece of leather. So in this way, if you use the plastic, once it's in there, you can kind of pull away the plastic from inside and then get rid of it. If there's a little bit of plastic in there left over, it's not really a big deal. You can't really feel it through the leather, so just makes the install job a little bit easier. You probably noticed that hyperlapse was pretty quick because this thing slid right in with this plastic bag. Made the job so freaking easy. And then it's nice because you can kind of move it around a little bit too, get it exactly how you want it. And then from there, you just kind of pull the plastic out as much as you can at least. Like I said, it's not really going to make a difference if you leave a little bit of plastic in there. No one's going to be able to tell the difference through the leather. Just do your best to get most of it out. Get the leather nice and set up in there. Get this centered. And then similarly to the headrest, there's going to be a little piece of Velcro here as well, but there's going to be that little plastic clip where you just want to fold this over and on itself and clip it into place. And this folds down, and there's a piece of Velcro here as well. Alright, the last piece of the puzzle here is the center armrest, which LSeat also includes. So for that, we just need to come in here and undo these 4 bolts. And that'll remove this top piece, and then we can go and take that to the workbench. Alright, once you got this guy out of the car, the last thing here is just to remove this outer shell from the inside. So we can just take our plastic trim tool, kind of pry up over here, and I did take this out already, so it's kind of loose. And that'll come right out. I think this is just held in by a little bit of glue from these top tabs. When we reinsert it, it kind of gets held in by this front piece, as well as those screws back in the car, so I think it'll stay in place, no problem. Once you're in here, you can see that there's basically all these little staples in here that we have to remove. So we'll remove those staples, and then we should be able to just wrap our new leather around, staple that into place. One last thing I forgot here, there are a couple extra Phillips head screws inside of here that we need to get out. That way we can get in here, wrap the leather around, and do some more stapling. As far as wrapping this new leather goes, just kind of make sure you got it oriented correctly. There's kind of this swoopy area towards the part where the handle is, and there's kind of a little notch at this other end. Just get it kind of lined up. And what I'm going to do is probably just start by stapling the bottom part here, pulling the top part nice and tight so that we get all these wrinkles out, stapling the top part, and then I can kind of work my way around and staple the side. Not too bad of a finished product here. You can see I stapled all around the inside, did a lot of stretching, made a couple relief cuts here at the front. Might throw a couple extra staples in there, but honestly it looks pretty good, pretty clean. A couple little wrinkles, but those might work out over time. Yeah, looks good. We'll go ahead and reinstall. Alright, well that's a wrap on this project. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down in the comments. And I'll try to get to those best I can. Anyway, see you guys. Alright, pre-car install. Let's try this out. Ooh, that's nice. Feels like a nice old leather couch, nice and plush. I wish the electronics were working. I'd lay this back.